Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you, as always, recapping some of the latest news with regard to the ICJ court ruling. They essentially, the way I would phrase it is they went about as far as they could without really pissing Israel and the United States off. They essentially said that Israel needs to do everything in its power to provide aid to Gazan civilians, punish those who incite or make genocidal statements, as was really shown by the South African court case, and essentially cannot provide any type of harm to the group as a whole. But they did not address the claims, and they did not substantiate the claims about an immediate effort to stop what is already going on right now. That's a pretty kind of important thing that really would have almost, I guess it's fair to say, just pissed off the United States, and it would have. I saw the point being made, create a crisis of legitimacy. I think that's definitely true. There would have been what happens when obviously Israel's going to ignore that ruling, so they pretty much put the most amount of pressure on it possible, without really breaking any sort of major taboos or making anyone too crazy. I do think it is important, given how historic it is, to listen to and kind of break down the whole ruling, which is what we are going to do. We have it here for you. And yeah, so I think it's important for everyone to see. It's about 4.5 minutes long, but we will pause it, kind of give it the thoughts as it goes along. So
I shall now read out the operative part of the order. For these reasons, the Court indicates the following provisional measures. 1. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sabatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall ensure, with immediate effect, that its military does not commit any acts described in point 1 above. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge Ad hoc Moseneke. Against, Judge Sabatinde, Judge Ad hoc Barak. By 16 votes to 1, the State of Israel shall take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judges Ad hoc Barak, Moseneke. Against, Judge Sabatinde. By 16 votes to 1, the State of Israel shall take immediate and effective measures to ensure the provision of urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance to address the adverse conditions of life faced by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt. Judges ad hoc Barak, Masenike. Against, Judge Sabatinde. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall take effective measures to prevent the destruction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to allegations of acts within the scope of Article 2 and Article 3 of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide against members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka, Abraham, Benuna, Youssef, Shway, Bandari, Robinson, Salam, Iwasawa, Nolte, Charlesworth, Brandt, Judge ad hoc Masenike. Against, Judge Sabatinde, Judge ad hoc Barak. By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect to this order within 1 month as from the date of the order. In favor, President Donahue, Vice President Gevorgian, Judges Tomka.
Yeah, so pretty much self-explanatory there. You can not really too much analysis that needs to be added, as you can hear going through. Mostly, I believe, it was the Israeli judge and I think one other who consistently sided on the anti side, but really a surprisingly strong unanimous or nearly unanimous decision on a lot of the stuff. And doing essentially focusing it though primarily on the future. I think, which is the big problem, and why many people in South Africa or in Gaza today are going to be pretty, disappointed in the wake of a decision like this. Obviously, what they aspired to was an immediate ceasefire, but yeah. So pretty much the way it was summed up in Al Jazeera is the International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct public incitement to commit genocide, and obviously to stop any, bottom line is that the very first was stop anything like this from happening at any point in the future. But the thing is, it is happening now. It is happening now, and it seems like it'll continue to happen. It seems like, that the court now has kind of called it out for, the future. But the fact is, what about, the last 30,000 plus deaths? What about all the, children who have been killed, all the civil society and, various civil registries that have been destroyed, all these just basic elements of any sort of standard Palestinian society that have been destroyed over the years, that just went, completely unanswered. And I do get for, a lot of activist chatter kind of going around and saying, don't help Israel kind of spin this as a win, because a lot of people in a lot of Israel-friendly press, you see LA Times, New York Times, people coming out there and saying, it was a kind of a surprising win for Israel today because they were told that they didn't have to exactly withdraw the IDF from the Gaza Strip by, Hamas or by the IDF or by Hamas, by the IDF, by the ICJ is what I meant to say. But yeah, so they're kind of spinning it as a big win, and we shouldn't help them do that. But I think it is just to report. It's important to, if you're listening to this podcast, just get the sense that a lot of people are, especially in the Gaza Strip today, who have been following this very, very closely, are not happy at all with what they've seen from the International Court of Justice because of the stopping short of calling an immediate ceasefire, which is what at the very top. South Africa came to that court to do. The court said Israel must ensure its forces do not commit genocide and take measures to improve the humanitarian situation. Must allow humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip is a pretty big deal. And essentially, but that can really come off as we're going to feed you can feed them, but then you could just kill them in the end. So there is a lot of reasons for pessimism on both sides. There is some people who even on the Israeli side, they've found a lot of stuff to be angry about. The fact that this was considered, the fact that this was viewed credible, and the fact that there was really orders, some pretty strong measures put forth by the ICJ in terms of trying to stop further killing is something that has the Israeli side pretty annoyed. But it is pretty incredible to see how it's a bit disappointing. It is definitely a bit dispiriting, and understandably so for a lot of Palestinians involved. But there is definitely a lot of kind of highly important points here. Just kind of the quick recap by bullet point here. The court A said it has jurisdiction to rule in the case. The court ordered Israel to take measures to prevent acts of genocide in the Gaza Strip and saying it must report back in 1 month. The court saying Israel must prevent and punish incitement of genocide in the Strip. The court says that Israel must allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, and the court obliged Israel to take more measures to protect Palestinians, but does not order it to end military operations in the Strip. Not really. And I think there's the Hezbollah out there also harping on the fact that said, both sides under humanitarian law have obligation to release hostages. Again, I think the big headline is essentially, and I think Owen Jones, the British commentator, phrased this pretty well, saying that there is sufficient evidence to suspect that genocide has been going on, but they can't make a definitive judgment at this time, was the position of the court. And obviously, so many things are kind of undergirded by the political situation. What would happen in the court? What would happen to the broader standing legitimacy of the court if right away the ruling came out and was condemned by by Israel and the U.S. and they said this is illegitimate, we don't recognize it, but instead they get to do this, that everyone kind of in the middle is able to, sign on to, while really, it's unclear to see how the situation fundamentally changes. The Palestinians here are saying that there is a reminder, this is the Fatah side, the PA side, that there's a reminder no state is above the law. South Africa hailed it as a decisive victory for international rule of law, thanking the ICJ for its swift ruling. The government said it would welcome the provisional measures and sincerely hoped Israel would not act to frustrate the application of the court's orders. It further said that it marked a significant milestone in the pursuit of justice for the Palestinian people. James Bays, the diplomatic reporter for Al Jazeera, says this was an interesting ruling because the judges agreed with most of South Africa's arguments. They agreed that they had jurisdiction in the case, they have standing in the case, that some of the things that South Africa has alleged are certainly taking place within the definition of the Genocide Convention, but where South Africa will be unhappy with the final operative paragraph, the rulings of the provisional measures are not the ones that South Africa has asked for. There were some specifics. Israel must do more humanitarian aid, and that Israel's got to appear again before the court with a report in 1 month's time to deal with the issues the court has raised. The ruling says that Israel needs to take every measure in its power to prevent things that could lead to genocide. For legal scholars now to look at this, because those include obviously preventing the killings of people within the protected group. So this essentially is saying if you're preventing the killings of the people within the protected group, every civilian you kill is a violation of the court's order. And that's why a lot of people, South Africa included, saying the only way that you can read this situation is by, kind of a ceasefire without saying directly a ceasefire. Because if you're telling the Israeli state, you have to take every possible measure not to kill, take every measure within your power not to kill civilians, then a lot of really the basic stuff. For example, the video the other day that we talked about on the last show about shooting the guy with the white flag, that is a clear violation of the court's orders. So that is, definitely something that is punishable. Hamas hailed the court's ruling as important, saying it contributes to isolating Israel. The ICJ's decision saying it's important because it exposes its crimes, Israel's crimes in Gaza. This is al-Maliki, Riyad al-Maliki, the Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs, said, nothing is above the law. And then Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, mocked the ICJ after the court ended its reading, pretty much saying what is the attitude for all Israelis within the start of this war. Haig Shmeig, the minister wrote on X in the first comments by an Israeli official. So pretty clear, where he is standing there, and pretty clear what Netanyahu is saying as well. Netanyahu says in a video that Israel is fighting a war, just war like no other. He added that Israel will continue to defend itself. And again, who gets this determined is the big question. If Israel is doing everything within its power to uphold international law, because that's what they've been saying they've been doing this whole time. So it's important there. The violent attempt he said, The violent attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is a blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. So a member of the Ramallah City Council, Lubna Farhad, has told Al Jazeera she was somewhat disappointed by the ICJ, but acknowledged it was a historic moment. Because let's be real, again, if you're in Gaza, the only thing you really hear about is, does this mean a ceasefire? But again, for a lot of people within the United States, it's not as bad as it could have been. I think it's pretty important to highlight. Here we have a U.S. official working on the Middle East policy told Akbar Shahid Ahmed, senior diplomatic correspondent of the Huffington Post, that Biden had a plan in place to respond to the ICJ's ruling, which is kind of a deeply cynical plan. According to the official, the U.S. expecting this order, they say that these are the steps what the U.S. is already pushing for. Everyone, when you don't really have a specific plan of action, everyone can kind of retrofit their rhetoric in the international state level. Even Israel can retrofit their rhetoric to say, "Oh, this is what we're doing the whole time. We've always been upholding international law, so this order is not going to be of any concern for us." That's why things definitely have been highlighted by the ruling, but it is not by any means any kind of definitive ruling or, as far as the court could have gotten. But, in certain ways, if you really need to uphold it, if you really try and uphold it, if you're serious about upholding it, it's going to mean a ceasefire. So it's widely acknowledged the current U.S. involvement presented as encouraging Israeli restraint is having little effect. Israel is attacking Gaza in the south as it did in the north, and the three top officials recently told me, this is Akbar Shahid Ahmed, that the attempts to boost aid were largely moot. While it was a legal blow that it didn't go as far to address slowing or stopping kinetic activity, which would have been a nightmare for our legal teams and top leadership, Biden's noting the chief Biden administration fear was the ICJ ordering a ceasefire. That was something that they did not do. You got to imagine that was the same in the Israeli government as well. The ICJ here does require a report which will be provided to South Africa and could be published. The U.S. official says that Israel is so far refusing to give U.S. details backing its claims of avoiding civilian casualties. They would love to see, the details they come up with to prove that. I think that would be very, very interesting. Just their general, strategy in proving that claim. But anyway, it's just very, very interesting stuff. So here's some more reaction. This is Nimir Sultani. He is a reader in law at SOAS Law, author of Law and Revolution, Legitimacy and Constitutionalism After the Arab Spring, editor-in-chief of the Palestinian Yearbook of International Law. ICJ. So they say he says that the ICJ dismissed Israel's arguments regarding jurisdiction. It ignored Israel's attempt to obfuscate genocidal statements, and it made no mention of Israel's argument regarding self-defense because it is irrelevant. Thus, it mocks the Western mantra of Israel has a right to defend itself. Again, there was no kind of marking, despite what you may hear, there was no thing, saying, Israel has the right to do this. There was something about, quick kind of offhand comment about the release of the hostages, but broader than that, it really did look at the crimes that were committed here. The court accepted that South Africa had made a strong case that is compelling enough to proceed to the merit stage, thus putting all states on notice there's a possible situation of genocide and a duty to prevent it. South Africa, he says here, Nimir Sultani, he says South Africa has pierced and cracked the political wall-to-wall support of Israel's savage war support to Israel's savage war in the West. Western media barely mentioned genocidal statements before South Africa initiated its litigation. Now, the ICJ is also contributing to the crumbling of the pathetic and uncritical narrative that Western states and media have adopted since October 7th. Western narrative over the war is over. He says. So, I think that it's definitely starting to be true, not just because of the case, but the continued drumbeat of cases and videos that we are seeing of just either, genocidal statements or just horrific actions, horrific massacres that are taking place, like the ITV video earlier this week. And I think that could be, just as effective when it comes to this. But, I don't know how much. I think it's very possible, unfortunately, that the Western governments will just go back to, doing what they did and not really doing anything major to change their course of action in regard to this, and trying to spin and obfuscate in a way that will help Israel. Magazines versed in war propaganda like The Economist called the South African application flimsy. The U.S., Canadian, German, and UK officials and spokesmen dismissed the premise of the South African case. Now the ICJ shows that they were completely wrong. And it is kind of it is definitely an embarrassing moment. Marwan Bashara of Al Jazeera said it's a big win as well. The fact the ICJ went on for almost 36 minutes making the case of why, first of all, there was a dispute between the South Africans and the Israelis, that South Africa has the right to take this up with the ICJ, and second, that the ICJ has jurisdiction in the case of Gaza. Then that means it's suspect there is genocide taking place in Gaza. It will take up the case. Basically, the ICJ, it does suspect that there, is possible genocide taking place. They're making the case that there is evidence, and that could lead to the fact that Israel is carrying out genocide in Gaza. South Africa asked first and foremost for a ceasefire, but the principle here is for a court of justice to accept a case, and the fact that they want reports from Israel moving forward is in a big way, a win for South Africa. He says, I'm saddened by the fact that there was no ceasefire, but I am not as saddened because I know Israel is not going to carry out the ceasefire. And it would have, imagine what the response would have been from Israel had that happened. Would they have just said, Andrew Jackson style, this is your ruling now, come and enforce it? And of course, the ICJ would not have been able to. We knew from the past 2 weeks that Israel was not going to abide by any ceasefire ruling. I think that is definitely fair to say. Also important to kind of address this really kind of quick. The UN Palestinian agency, UNRWA, said it has opened a probe into the alleged involvement of several of its employees in the October 7th attacks in southern Israel. Again, this is from Shin Bet, this is from Mossad, this is from some of the shadiest actors in terms of Israeli intelligence, and the Israeli government now, months after the fact, providing evidence that and by the way, just minutes after they get found to be, just have a credible accusation against them of genocide and is found credible by the ICJ, they come out with the fact that, the UN, which is deeply associated with this court, they just throw against the wall, the UN was involved with the October 7th attacks. The Israeli authorities have provided UNRWA with information about the alleged involvement of several UNRWA employees in the horrific attacks on Israel on October 7th. The Reuters news agency quoted UNRWA Commissioner General Philip Lazzarini as saying, and I think it's important, as we know, we have seen time and time again this evidence of just basic fact of the fact that UN schools have been targeted time and time again throughout this as the, one of the main sheltering points for Palestinian civilians. Of course, they have been targeted, but it's kind of unclear whether it was reflexively after the fact or it was, kind of a predetermined strategy of devaluing and kind of destroying the credibility of the UN. But that is definitely something that's gone on in increasing numbers and kind of is really kind of has borrowed circles over the past few weeks, the propaganda circles. And now we are seeing that taking its, kind of final form and just saying straight up, accusing them of being involved in the October 7th attack. The Israeli authorities, again, they provided the UNRWA association with information to protect the agency's ability to deliver humanitarian assistance. I have taken the decision to immediately terminate the contracts of these staff members and launch an investigation in order to establish the truth without delay. And, the people who are really concerned about this, I would ask you, what during this conflict has Israel what bold claim have they made that has not been seriously questioned by, even the Al-Akhli hospital being a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket was severely brought into question, not just by, Al Jazeera or whatever, which it was, but by the British Channel 4, which showed that the rocket was coming from a place that was, not in the direction of that, cemetery, whatever they said, but was from over the border in the Gaza envelope. So that, and, despite what a French, some little known French agency said, after the fact, but throughout all their other claims, even the ones that they made throughout this war, for example, my personal favorite, what you go to the beheaded babies. You can go to the fact that this is actually my personal favorite. The idea that there was the Hamas headquarters under the hospital that was even admitted by the Washington Post was a complete lie. There was no evidence found about that after the fact, and yet there was no kind of addressing of it. But there was so much in terms of the hype before it happened. Oh, there's terror tunnels. This is a main HQ under the hospital, but there was nothing ever found of it, and nothing was ever done about the fact that nothing was ever found of it. At least when there was no WMDs, the U.S. really heard it. They got the blowback, but this is not even happening for Israel, and they didn't even get the death toll of the October 7th attack right on the first or second try. So, if you really expect and believe, Israeli reports without any other type of credible investigation, especially ones that the UN officials were involved in carrying out the October 7th attack, when we know that not even the political bureau of Hamas was really fully in the loop for security reasons. They, definitely kept this for operational security. They kept it pretty tight. I don't think Israelis really do have a good opportunity. If you look at some of their conduct in Gaza, I don't think they do have a very good understanding of operational security with all their, TikTok dances. But some people, when you're trying to commit attack, the kind of idea is, say whatever you want about the attackers, but you really don't tell other people about the attack you're trying to commit unless, they are deeply involved. So, again, maybe these UN officials somehow are pulled out 4 months into the war, are going to be the biggest, they're somehow the leaders of Hamas, but also working, day shifts at UNRWA. But I highly doubt it. It's not like everyone in Gaza, this is what they want you to believe, that everyone in Gaza knew about this thing, but there is no evidence to it. All we get is just narrative from a government that has been caught lying and had to change literally its own death toll of the attack that it suffered multiple times. So, it's not looking good. Anyway, let's get back here more towards some of the reaction of the case. Netanyahu apparently has ordered his government not to comment on the ICJ ruling, according to the Israeli Broadcasting Authority. So the World Court's interim ruling, it did kind of stop short, but it rejected Israel's contention that the court did not have jurisdiction. I think that's a very, very key point. We do look at some of the other reactions. The government of Spain celebrates the decision in the ICJ. They released a kind of decision coming out about that. And it'd be the Israeli reaction, the South African reaction coming in. There is kind of a continued support from Turkey as well for the Palestinians. I think, which is Erdogan tweeted something out, but nothing too absolutely earth-shaking when it comes to the broader narrative. France saying they're deeply committed to respecting international law and reaffirming its confidence in and support of the International Court of Justice. Namibia called on the United Nations Security Council and the international community to ensure the provisional measures of the ICJ are fully implemented in the face of the unprecedented carnage in Gaza. So pretty, broad support, mostly from Palestinian supporting countries, relatively celebratory of the ruling. And not many, Mexico, a lot of African countries weighing in, Chile, if you look at this kind of feed of international reaction, Slovenia weighing in. It'd be interesting to see what they have to say, because they are, most of these Eastern European countries are relatively pro-Israeli a lot of the time. But I gotta just give me 1 second to translate it here. Slovenia welcomes the decision of the ICJ, which ordered Israel, among other things, to take effective measures to provide urgent humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza and prevent genocide in Gaza. Slovenia expects that the court's decision will be respected by all parties. At the same time, we personally call for an immediate ceasefire, the release of the hostages, and peace plan that will lead to a two-state solution. So not a very surprising situation. With regard to the application here. So just looking at some broader reactions here. This is from Nimer Soltani. The ICJ rejected Israel's claims regarding humanitarian assistance. Thus, Israel will have to show a major change, and the ICJ order Israel should take immediate and effective measures to allow humanitarian assistance. So again, that is another major thing. Humanitarian aid now kind of has to come into Gaza under this ruling, and they have to report about how much humanitarian aid they've been letting in a month's time. So what will happen then if there is no humanitarian aid let in? And something this will again require scaling down military actions and bombardments here. The order to cease genocidal acts, including those that are calculated to bring about the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza, having cited famine and mass displacement, means also that Israel has to drastically change its military action. Propaganda outlets like the New York Times, who published puff pieces claiming Aaron Barak, the Israeli judge, is not an emissary of his state, also kind of looked pretty embarrassing because he was like the only one that ruled against him. If you heard in that clip that we played before, ad hoc judge Barak, that was the Israeli one who was pretty much always the one or two who even sometimes joined with his own party, or against his own state, and saying that they had to put in. And they had to send more aid, and they do anything within their power to stop the genocide. Again, the question here of these enforcement mechanisms, I think, is going to be pretty key. And of course, the court can only really release judgments, but it is definitely going to be interesting to see how they respond to any report that Israel may produce and submit, I think, to South Africa in a month's time, especially when it comes to the regard of humanitarian aid, which is definitely something that Israel, and especially as we've seen with the protests, Israeli society does not want to let in. What does the ruling mean to Zionism? Zionists, this is from Sultan here, Zionists treated 7th of October as an attack on all Jews in the world and defended Israel against all charges. This shows that Zionism has an illuminationist logic that gets accentuated in such conditions. Zionism is racism and genocide. What does the ruling mean for anti-war demonstrations in London and elsewhere? It will give them backing and invigorate them, despite the tabloids and corrupt pro-genocide political class, from the Labour to the Tories. Very, very, again, insightful stuff from Soltani, who's really made a very interesting thread at NIMER Soltani, if you want to see more. Muin Rabbani, who is a Palestinian kind of legal, very, very important Palestinian legal mind. He said, "It has been my view that at this stage of the proceedings, this case boils down to a single issue, where the ICJ determines that South Africa has presented a plausible accusation that Israel is committing genocide, and on this basis allows the case to move forward to a full hearing before the World Supreme Court. Everything else is secondary." On this crucial main point, the court's verdict was unambiguous. The arguments presented by South Africa before the ICJ earlier this month were sufficiently compelling, and Israel's rebuttal and denials unconvincing. Therefore, the court will now conduct a full and proper hearing to determine whether Israel is not only plausibly accused, but substantively responsible for the crime of genocide. History, with a capital H, was made today. As of 26 January 2024, Israel and its Western sponsors can no longer mobilize the Holocaust to shield themselves from accountability for their crimes against the Palestinian people. Roz Siegel, a professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies, recently made the point that the Israeli state was born in impunity, with the Holocaust serving as an all-purpose shield against accountability for its crimes. No more. The late Edward W. Said often spoke of the Palestinian people as the victims of the victims, and the difficulty many in the West had conceiving of Israel, which claims to exist as a response to the Holocaust, as a state capable of war crimes and crimes against humanity. That is no more. Israel is, as of today, associated with the crime of genocide primarily as perpetrator, not as victim. Israel's policies towards the Palestinian people will henceforth be judged on their own merits rather than against the long shadow of European history. The ICJ today redefined never again. It's no longer a slogan that can be used by Israel to commit and justify crimes against others, but now one that applies equally to Israel's actions today, currently, against Palestinian victims. Let's hope, that judgment sinks in. It's going to be important to monitor the, entire reaction to this all. As we're seeing continued fighting in Khan Yunis and targeting of southern Gazan hospitals, causing a mass kind of Nakba-style exodus from Khan Yunis. The Israeli UN envoy slammed the UNRWA agency and the United Nations more broadly. And, Netanyahu called the case a vile attempt, the ICJ case, a vile attempt to destroy Israel. But yeah, bottom line is attacks, especially in the south of Gaza, continue. This is not stopping anytime soon, and we will continue to monitor it for you. This has been Newsflash.